Hi, this series called Gist, whereby I make video logs for my own consumption and possible interaction or benefit of others as well, on books, articles, movies, or anything that I read or come across. I recently, uh, sometime back though, not too long ago, finished a book by the name Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. So I finished this book, and a very interesting book, uh, a simple but very powerful message is what I would take away from this book, and I have tried to implement, even if not with a lot of success, but at least I become very conscious of the key message that has been conveyed in this book. It is a very simple message, but a very, very powerful message. I think we've sort of strayed away from it. We have forgotten it. In fact, the author does make a very clear point that it is a lost art. So the name of the book is Breath. Before we get into it, let me pull up what I found about the author, and I was trying to re-jog my memory on it because I think he's done quite a lot of extensive work in his field and written two amazing books. One is Breath, the one I'm covering right now, and the other is by the name Deep, Freediving Renegade Science and What the Ocean Tells Us About Ourselves. I believe it is Deep. I'm not too sure. Was it Depth? Okay, yeah, that's the one. So I'm still trying to get my hands on that one. I've still not found time to kind of venture out and get that one. But this book did make me want to look into this aspect of life a bit too deeply. Let's begin with this. Let me set off what my thoughts are and the key takeaways for this book without beating about the bush and delving into or getting distracted a bit. So the breath that we're talking about and the author talks about is the first and the last thing, right? Is the first thing that we take when we are born, and is the last thing that leaves us when we die. We all know this material fact, not that the author is breaking some news to us, but and it's also filling everything in between the whole life. So it's with us every minute, every second, every breath. Oh, but here is something that the author opened my eyes towards. Sometimes a book really affects me and influences me, and people influence me and their thoughts and opinions. So I'm not sure if somebody would be on the same page with me on this. That I think I kind of did not even bother about it till I actually read this book and thought back. I mean, though I've had influences and I've been impressed by the powerful or the power of yoga and yogic meditations and breathing exercises and all that, but it was a bit too esoteric, a bit too extreme at times, and seemingly intimidating and difficult. It continues to be that. I mean, now that I've suddenly started waking up at 5 and practice yoga after reading this book or any other book, but this book did simplify the whole thing for me, and that is what is key for me, because you got to dumb it down for somebody like me to be able to pick up things sometimes. I'm not really saying that the book is dumb or it dumbs down, but it simplifies the whole message for at least me to take away. So James Nestor, I think he's. Let's talk a little bit about the author, uh, and he's done so much that I have to keep referring to notes on and off. That, in fact, a lot about him I ended up pulling up from his own page. It's almost sort of a self-introductory note and a resume that he's posted out there, and it's quite impressive. He's an author and a journalist. He's written for Scientific American, BBC, New York Times, The Atlantic. Uh, Notably, Surfer's Journal. I did not know of it. Obviously, I've had different influences in my life, and now that I'm more exposed to this side of the world, I'm able to pick up different names and journals, and they're very interesting. I mean, the kind of material and content that I get to see in that is something I've not at all had the chance of being exposed to or come across or read. So Surfer's Journal, he's written this book, and it right away took off. It was the New York Times bestseller for 18 weeks. It had sold 2 million copies worldwide. That's notable again, and you know, good reviews by all the journals of the time, and top 10 bestsellers in Spain, Germany, Croatia, and Italy, which kind of tells you how much This book has been able to connect with people of different cultures, countries, regions, and so on and so forth. Uh, this book also won a couple of prizes. All right, so let's get into that. Best General Nonfiction Book of 2020 by American Society of Journalists and Authors. Finalist for the Royal Society Best Science Book of 2020. It's a science book. I mean, that's the part that really amazes me. I actually thought it's just a nonfiction, but it's, and then it dwelled on me that it is a science book. It talks about the science of breathtaking. It's been translated to 35 languages, including Mongolian. Uh, that's powerful. That it has reached the breadth and width of the globe. Uh, well, as I said, he mentions this in another book, and I got to know this. Deep, freediving renegade science, what the ocean tells us about ourselves. I think I heard this on the Joe Rogan show when James Nestor was on that show, or some reference that Joe Rogan made of it. And my bad, that actually it actually slipped my mind, and I always want to get hold of it. Though I did remember the book Breath, and I was able to kind of get my hands on it, and thankfully I did. Uh, I did read through it. Uh, in further to that book that he mentions, Deep, he interestingly he follows a clan of or teams or groups of extreme athletes, adventurers, and scientists as they plumb the limits of the ocean's depths. So that's going to be interesting because I've seen the cover of that book now online, and it looks like that would give further insight into this science of breath that we're talking about here. And again, it's been that book has been translated into many languages as well. He's given talks and lectures and spoken at Stanford, Harvard, Yale medical schools, United Nations, and whatnot. 60 radio shows and television shows, podcasts, morning shows, prime time, and all that. Well, he's also part of Project CETI. How do you pronounce it? I'll still have to. I'll have to see that again. Cetacean, I think. Yeah, that's the pronunciation. Cetacean Translation Initiative. All right. Coming back to the book, I mean, it's so simple. Again, at the cost of being repetitive, it's a simple book with a key takeaway being that we have forgotten the very basics of our life and death, which is the breath. We don't take the proper breath. We do not realize or do not spend time enough with ourselves to realize that's the first thing we need to focus on. How to breathe. Do we know that? I did not know that. Or I at least did not even think about it. I would just breathe. And if I'm breathing, I'm breathing. I mean, yes, I had influences, as I said, on certain people would say yoga is amazing, and I did that, and I would breathe with certain, fervor and energy, but that did not really give me results because I was not doing justice to it. I'm still not on that path, but what has changed is my understanding that it is important, and I do try and keep that in mind. In fact, it has become a constant thing with me, and that I breathe, or I try to be conscious of the way I'm breathing at different times. These smartwatches really help at times. There are mindfulness reminders that would keep coming in, and I try to make most of those. Why not? Technology is such a augmentation to my capabilities that I would rather make use of it than not. Uh, so in fact, if we just go through the contents of this book or the contents page, one realizes a different uh, thoughts or touch points that create a mental map of the things that we've not thought about or have not thought about in regards to breath. We've become the worst breathers in the animal kingdom, according to the premise of the author. We do a lot of mouth breathing, and in fact, that's the reason, scientifically proven apparently, that we are seeing increased number of cases with different respiratory illnesses and problems like asthma, sinus, and so on and so forth. And then when one is in the initial few chapters or just the contents of this book, one realizes, is that an exaggeration? And then you yourself would realize that you're answering, no, it is not, because actually it makes sense that if breath goes to all parts of the body, I mean, through the process of carrying oxygen and then being part of blood flow, of course, it affects all parts of the body. And if that's the case, then it affects the bones, it affects the bone structure, it affects skin, it affects metabolism, it affects eyesight, it affects thought process, cranial density, I think he mentions of, and all those things. It affects the teeth. and then it hits you. It hits you so it almost hits you like with so many points that you want to just kind of run through this book. That's my experience. But it's a very intense read in that sense, because it might look like simple, all right, I'm just reading about what has happened, what are we not doing and all that, but it's technical. It's a lot of research and studies that the author has perused over to come to an understanding on what is he trying to point out. He's researched through different cultures, their influences, what their belief system was, uh, how, and I mean he talks about anatomy, one, he talks about cultures, two, in my mind, and the third, the most important part, is corrective measures we need to take or be mindful of. For me, these three are the broader three categories in which I would say his explanation is. Now, cultures, China, India, and even the Southern American cultures were very old in that sense, and African. All of them have had, as per the evidences, facts, or researches conducted by the author and all the material that he perused through, that I have no particular reason to doubt because it looks very convincing at the logical sense of it. All of them did have insightful takes on breath, caretaking of your own body, their science towards it, and then one thinks that we really lost it over the course of time for whatever reasons. I mean, we got entangled into our own ways and means of world and politics and the rush and the jobs and all that, or at least that's how we moved forward. But it stays that we knew this art, or at least our ancestors knew this art very well. They were so particular about it. In one instance, which still sticks with me, is the fact that some of the Southern American cultures would prohibit breathing from mouth. And that takes me to the next takeaway, which is how it all works. We breathe through the nose. If you're not properly breathing over time, because it's all muscles and muscle memory, the nostrils start becoming thinner, or they don't expand enough by that force of air. Now that starts affecting all the things. The nose is supposed to air condition the air. I never thought about that. So a deep breath, the longer you take, the more time it has to travel, and it kind of conditions it according to the temperature. And noticeably, we either breathe too much or too little according to the temperatures and or the air pressure wherever we are in terms of the altitude. So it all affects. Now that starts having effect on how our teeth are formed. There could be disformalities, or there's a term that he uses. Let me pull it. Malocclusion, misaligned teeth. It's all because of air. We don't realize the power of water and air at times, and we take it lightly. But too much of it, or a constant flow of it, can actually cause a lot of corrosion. I mean, the most easiest way to see it is on the coastal front. Look at the houses; they're corroded most of the times because of the moist air. That's the case. The misalignment, the way you breathe and open your mouth, or you're breathing out, so the shape of teeth bends. It was mind blowing for me to read that part in depth. The jaw structure changes. People and their chewing abilities have reduced, which again impacts the whole internal structure of your mouth and your ENT, and the way you breathe, and the basic chemistry of it, biochemistry of it, oxygen and carbon dioxide released in the body. The more carbon dioxide, or the less efficient we breathe, which means we are not burning oxygen properly, and then more carbon dioxide is formed, which then mixes up with the minerals, and then more bicarbonates get formed, which basically causes loss of minerals from our body, and hence they affect the bones, bone density, acidity or pH, alkaline pH in our body, which then affects our digestive system, and so on and so forth. It affects our kidney, it affects our whole thing. I mean, to the extent it affects your sleep as well. All right, it gets a little overbearing at that point, but by this time you're neck deep into it, and you just want to understand what's wrong with the way I've understood or I've been doing things, and I just want to go course correct right away. So this book becomes the go-to to understand. Like, I've already read it twice because I actually, thought I got it, and then I kind of forgot over a period of time what to do, and then I had to remind again. So I hold this book in my collection for that reason. Again, culturally, he talks about the fact that the Chinese would call have typical or very critical outlook towards improper breathing and the whole, I can connect it with the fact that the Shaolin and movies we've seen and all they might be exaggerations, but they come from some form of manifestation of this science that was available in those cultures. Same is the case with yogic practices. One would know that we've seen or heard of cases whereby the yoga practitioners of certain level who've been doing it for years have different health or measure or visible measure of their health than others. Sometimes they don't even look or appear to be aging, and sometimes they live even in colder temperatures without without too much of clothing or the type of food that would be required. Now that could be achieved through breathing. In fact, that reminded me of this YouTube channel and by these young lads who were very adventurous, and they went to some parts in Poland whereby they found a person who practiced in breathing exercises, and he could help them tolerate extremely cold temperatures. I'm forgetting the name of that channel and the group, but it was very interesting. And then it circles back to breathing. Uh, there are different practices, different ways of breathing in yoga and yogic prescriptions, whereby you can control your whole body mechanism by altering, let's say, breathing from left nostril or the right nostril, or a combination or alterations and permutations. Uh, Quite mind blowing when it comes to that. In fact, this is where I thought that then it was all pervasive around the globe, that it was found even in Catholic prayer cycle, which prescribed 5.5 seconds of inhalation and exhalation, which means 5.5 breaths per minute. And that's the most ideal form of breathing. Or let's say, in the samurai practices, they used to say that, or they used to prescribe to their pupils that you would breathe in a manner whereby it is so controlled that even a feather would not flutter while you breathe. It's that level of science that we're talking about. Not that easy for somebody who's this spoiled as I am by now, the way I've lived over the years, not bothered about breathing at all. It's so difficult to change it right now that good that I've read this book, but I've not really been able to honestly implement it to that extent. The only thing that has changed is that I'm conscious of it and I try to do it. But is it difficult? For me, it's been extremely difficult. I keep relapsing into that same old practice of breathing through the mouth, and well, I have though remarkably seen the benefit, or at times the difference between breathing when I'm breathing from my nose and breathing from the mouth. The nose breathing does cool and calm the body in times of anxiety a lot more, because firstly you have to take a deeper breath. With mouth, you don't have to take a deeper breath. It's just a lot of gust of air. With nose, especially when you're breathing out from your nose and not using your mouth at all, which, by the way, let me point out, he points out is supposedly just a backup alternative in case your nose is blocked, or you're in a way choked on that front, so that you can relieve yourself by the alternate route, which is through the mouth. Well, that's essentially what this book talks about. It talks about the basic things that we've forgotten over time, which are very critical, which are very essential, and we should be mindful of those, try and bring those back into our lives and see the positive changes. For instance, chewing. We've forgotten the chewing, the importance of chewing with a modern food made to be very convenient and easy to eat, which does not exercise our jaws and the bones connected to it enough, and which creates problems like sinus and obstruction of the muscles or the bones that get developed or underdeveloped. Now, when we talk about the bones, he's also talking about the fact that these things are very visible in modern life. We do not tend to sit properly with the correct posture, which would help you breathe deeper by allowing your lungs to expand properly. We tend to slouch, we tend to shrug, and that's creating pressure on the brain stem, and then the whole spine shape, and so on and so forth. I mean, frankly speaking, there's so many things he talks about that kind of, you do feel a bit dejected with the lifestyle. Uh, but that's not the real point. The point is to, in fact, get inspired, I think, and feel lucky that one has come across this book at a certain point in one's life. It could be later, it could have been 10 years later, and then it would have been even more difficult. So the earlier the better. But it's been very difficult to implement it into my life and make use of it to the extent, with the examples that have been quoted, to the extent of those examples, like yogic and Chinese practices and Japanese practices and Southern American practices, erstwhile practices. So that's the point. That's the book. That's the key takeaways. Those are the key takeaways from this book, Breath by James Nestor, and the new science of a lost art. Those are the keywords. Try reading it for yourself, because there are a lot of nuggets of important information that one needs to know. There's actually so much that you would need to read at least more than once to be able to retain that and implement those important things. Now, having said this, I have a couple of questions for which I'll have to read further. I'll have to read his second book for sure. I'll also have to read alternate theories and schools of thought on this, because I have come across the importance of anaerobic exercise versus aerobic exercise and all those things. One, two, what happens when you're swimming? You are breathing through your mouth. I have no answer, or I've not been able to understand that through this book yet. I don't know if I missed it or not, but I don't think that gets covered in this premise. Third, how, and I've seen this, that a lot of especially a lot of mixed martial art, I've seen this in mixed martial art interviews by the mixed martial artists, by people who are the coaches and all that there is some merit in breathing through the mouth as well. Now, that throws this whole book upside down. I mean, if in today's date I see myself where I stand on the side of the nose breathing than the mouth breathing. I see the benefits of it. I see the logic of it. But it's always good to challenge one's own belief system or one's own influences. Now, this is one of the influences, and I need to find out the answer of the other influence. Makes sense logically. Yes, oxygen goes in, it air conditions the air, which means the body has done its function properly. But then there's a reason you get the mouth as well. And how do you swim otherwise? We might have evolved on the land, but if we keep going back on the timeline, we did probably at some point in time evolved even from the water. So let's see. I mean, I'm going to get my hands on this one and find out the answers to that, and hopefully make up a better informed decision on how to take care of health. It's very important. It's very critical. It's the most important thing. The breath. Let's not underestimate it. Let's not undermine it. We need to. There's no want. We need to, as a matter of necessity, take care of our own health, and it begins with the first breath that we take every day, every now and then. Exercising, breathing properly and the right amount does make a lot of difference to the rest of the health. Hopefully, you would get your hands on this book. Share your thoughts as well in this in the comment section. I really need to get more insights on this, so that will help me. More than happy to get thoughts. More than happy to discuss this further and see what are the takeaways for different people. That's how I learn, and I'm sure that's how most of the people learn, through interaction. It was good to break the monotony of not being able to make videos on the books that I've been reading, but I've been trying to tell myself each time that I would make videos. I would keep continuing to make videos. It clears the thoughts, it clears the mind, and it helps put in motion the idea of conversation and learning from each other. Well, with that in mind, with that thought, thank you for joining in, and hopefully this has been useful to you. Please feel free to share, subscribe, and like. That would really help me in my cause. And I would also try and make a Hindi English version of it, so that if somebody prefers to or is more inclined to get more information from that medium, that would help them. So please pass it on. Really, really would appreciate that. And thank you. Have a good one. Bye bye.